Hello! I haven't been able to sleep the past few days, so I decided to make a few videos about different ideas I've had for our game design class. These are primarily targeted at my team members, but they're for anyone to watch. So the first idea is actually based on a dream. In this dream, you played as an 8-bit character, and there was another 8-bit character, and the two of them fought each other. Now, the interesting thing about the dream was, over the course of the game, these characters would gradually get better until eventually they looked like they advanced graphically. This is a little bit like Evoland, I think. Probably where that was inspired from. Anyway, eventually the characters would upgrade to the point where one of them was way better than the other and the other didn't stand a chance. So, that was an interesting dream, but it doesn't make for that good of a game idea in itself. More of a concept. Here's some of the ideas that have spawned from it. First idea. I took this one from Dota. Now, for those of you who haven't played Dota, I'm going to give you a quick rundown on exactly how the game is played. Right, so Dota is a game where two teams of 5 players cooperate with each other in order to destroy the other team. They destroy the other team by destroying their ancient, but the ancient spawns endless waves of mobs which go forth in these lanes. The mobs meet in the lanes, fight each other, and it would be just a endless battle, except that the heroes push the tide of battle one way or the other until eventually one player pushes the other player back to the other base and wins. Okay, so where do we go from there? Well, the perspective would be different for one, giving the players a platformer-style perspective, but endless waves of mobs would still rush towards each other and meet at the center to do battle. The only reason one would gain advantage over the other is because the heroes would turn the tides of battle. Now, of course, this wouldn't be played on a small map like I had just shown, it'd be played on a very large field of battle, allowing for a longer game and more strategic decisions along the way. But it gets more interesting yet. It seems obvious that if we want to include elements of upgrading, we need some kind of currency. This currency we could call pixels. Pixels are just a way of upgrading or building upon yourself. Now, pixels come in a few different ways. Way number one is through these 3 checkpoints, which are distributed equidistant across the map. Own the checkpoint, and you gain a slow income of money from it. Some other ways of earning money include killing creeps, which will provide a very small amount of money, and of course, killing other players, which would provide a large amount of money. Now, I imagine this game to be more of a 2-player affair than a 5-player game due to the 2-dimensional nature. And when players die, their character is temporarily removed from the game. Now, they're given a wait timer that increases every time they die. While they're dead, obviously the other player is going to be destroying more mobs and earning more money. Okay, so what do you do with money? 1, you can upgrade your character graphically and add new abilities to itself. 2, you could get different creeps, which would help you turn the tide of battle even faster. And 3, in case you're losing, create powerful defensive structures to try to halt the advance of the other team. Okay, to summarize, mobs travel forth, meet at the center, do battle, players turn the tide of battle, sometimes they die, sometimes they win, they get points, they upgrade themselves until eventually one player is powerful enough to win. Now, how do you win, do you ask? There's 2 bases on either side of the map. If either of these bases are destroyed, that player loses. Players will gradually push each other across the map until eventually they reach the base and destroy it. Make it seem simple enough, but lends itself to enough room for strategic thought. So there's an element of strategy in deciding how you spend the money, as well as an element of skill in just how you play the game. Now, to conclude, let's just summarize the idea. Mobs spawn, meet at the center, fight each other, players turn the tide of battle, players earn money, players upgrade themselves. Eventually, one player pushes the other to the end of the map and wins. Right. So, here's some drawbacks for the idea. First of all, we have the snowball effect. The snowball effect is the idea that players who start to win are only going to win more because they're getting more money and making more progress. This is not fun to the losing player, to say the least. Next up, we have the purely competitive nature of the game. Now, it's not always a good thing that a game is competitive. Usually these types of games have a cooperative element to them, such as team members that you're supporting along the way. We don't have that in this game. And a lot of players simply don't like the idea of a purely competitive game. A lot of them find it frustrating, especially when they're on the losing side. Next, we have the learning curve. Okay, so although the game might be easy to pick up and play, since new abilities and controls are introduced slowly, it's still a little bit like chess in that it takes a very long time to learn how to play this kind of game well. It could be a good thing, more often than not it's a bad thing. Finally, we have balance concerns. As anyone who's done this sort of thing will know, it takes a very, very long time to balance out a large range of characters, each with their own special abilities that behave very differently than each other. Now, this is a time concern for us, but it's also a gameplay concern as far as the game goes, because if things aren't balanced correctly, the game just becomes a matter of who picks the right character. Not a very good thing. These are some pretty serious drawbacks, and we should definitely keep all of these things in mind if this is the path we end up taking. Right, but next we have the bright sides, the strong points. A lot of these strong points are just the other side of the coin of the drawbacks. For example, the sports-like challenge of this sort of game. Lots of people see it as a good thing. Mankind has been striving against each other since the dawn of time, and people like good old-fashioned competition. Going back to the learning curve, we have the natural gameplay learning curve. Basically, I'm just saying that it's easy to pick up and play this game. You start with not a lot to do with your character, and you gradually add new abilities at the player's command. This means that the learning curve is natural and only advances as the player wants to, giving them a few things at a time. Next of all, we have the large potential for gameplay depth. What I'm basically saying here is players can do a lot of things. There's a lot of options open to them. Do you make a character that's really beefy but has a weak lane of mobs? Or do you let your mobs do all the heavy work? Do you play defensively, offensively? Do you push late game, mid game? There's a lot of depth to consider in this sort of thing. And last of all, we have the fact that it's a proven, addictive formula. Games like Dota have been on the top of the Steam's most played list for a long time, and even before that, when it was a Warcraft 3 map, it was one of the top played games. These games are addictive for one reason or another. People love them. But there's one more important thing, another big strong point, multiplayer. It's a great thing to play against other people. This goes back to the sports-like challenge idea, but people like to fight against each other. People like to challenge each other, to engage in competition. It's just part of human nature. And although it would be nice to create a cooperative element to this game, even just competition's great. Right, now, roadblocks. Basically, these are things that are going to be difficult to program when we actually implement the game idea. So, the first roadblock that we have is the multiplayer coding. Multiplayer is a pain. It can take months upon months to write good multiplayer code framework. I've tried to do it before, unsuccessfully. I think with a team with strong programmers like we have now, it shouldn't be an issue, but it will definitely be one of the hardest things. Next, we have the art style. If we are going to go with advancing characters graphically, it means we have to work in 8-bit, 16-bit, 32-bit, 3D, and it's just a very wide range, making it very difficult and time-consuming for us to implement. AI patterns for creeps is kind of a minor concern. We have to just remember that we need to program the behavior of all of these creeps, including any different varieties that we throw in. This shouldn't be too difficult, but it does take a lot of time. Next up, we have balance. It's time-consuming, like I said. Games can spend years balancing them. When Dota 2 came out, I believe they spent over a year and a half in beta just balancing characters out before they let their actual release go through. And time is not a luxury we have. There's no ideal engine either. If we use Unity, it means that we're not making it something ideal for 2D games. If we use GameMaker, how the hell are we going to do multiplayer? There's just a lot to consider here, and perhaps we need to do more research if this is the path we want to take. Lastly, there's the aspect of controls. Now, controls are a hard thing. To make something intuitive for players to use is very difficult. And for every player that we create, we're going to need to conquer that challenge all over again. Every character needs to play differently, and thus should probably control differently. Standardizing the control set may or may not be a good idea depending on how we decide to implement players altogether. Right, those were the roadblocks, advantages and disadvantages of that game idea. I'm open to feedback, of course, especially from you, my team members. I really want to know what you think of this idea and the ideas that I'll be posting after this. In the next video, I'm going to be explaining idea number 2 based off of this dream I had, before diverging completely into idea number 3, which is more of a space strategy game. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I pray that I can sleep again soon.